Okay, we're gonna go ahead. It's two after, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So I will introduce myself and introduce further thoughts, and then I'm going to introduce our guest presenters, Richard and Sharon, and we'll get into the conversation and the presentation we're gonna have today. And we're gonna make sure we save some time at the end for questions and answers. And throughout the presentation, if you have questions, go ahead and put it in the chat, like Sharon said, so that way you're writing it down while it's fresh in your head. But that way, Sharon and Richard can get through the presentation, and then we will circle back to any questions that are put in the chat, plus open it up to the audience to ask questions as well. I will also put in the chat a couple of times a super quick feedback form that you can do afterwards to just say what was helpful. And if we run out of time and you have additional questions, you can also put those questions in the form and we'll get back to you. So with that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Betsy Hall. I'm the founder of For Their Thoughts Foundation. Just the quick backstory on myself is that I come from an FTD family, frontotemporal dementia. My mom was diagnosed in her 50s, and my grandmother was diagnosed in her late 70s. They were unfortunately diagnosed the same year and passed away the same year. So my family learned very quickly that we have a genetic form, which makes this very much part of my past, present, and future. And with that, I learned that my journey of figuring out where to go for resources, how to handle this disease, how to not feel so isolated alone was not just my story, but it belongs to thousands and literally millions of other caregivers out there. And so I founded For Their Thoughts Foundation, and the bottom line is our mission is you. It's the mission is the caregivers and the families of dementia. We have a lot of focus on young onset, but we are not exclusively just young onset. We have two main programs. One is called Care for the Caregivers Relief Program. And with that, we help develop that roadmap of resources and relief for families based on where they are in the caregiving process. And for eligible living caregivers, we have a $1,000 grant that can supplement them as well. And that is a relief grant, no strings attached, that they can use for what is relief to them. Our indirect support is webinars like this, which we've just started. This is our second one, to have an opportunity to have some free conversations and some one-on-one conversations with families about dementia topics. And perfect timing for rules of the road, that roadmap of resources. And then the second the second program that we have within Rethink Dementia is an in-person dementia lab experience where you experience what it's like to have dementia, followed by an empathy session, so that you can really understand what your loved one's going through and how you can utilize that information to connect with them, communicate, and just live better with them. And so again, we have two programs, and today it's based on the webinar. So that's all I'll say about For Their Thoughts. And I just want to introduce Richard and Sharon, and then I will put myself on mute. So Richard, he is a classically trained chef. He spent his professional life connecting nature's bounty, adding a liberal sprinkling of international flavor. 10 years into his marriage, FTD reshaped Richard's choices with his husband's diagnosis. Now he cares, advocates, and feeds a community ravaged by the confusion and isolation. Sharon has been an active FTD and young onset dementia advocate for 7 years. She wants to make sure dementia families have honest answers to their questions. Her advocacy started when her husband, Rod, was diagnosed with BV-FTD. And so with that, I will put myself on mute, and the floor is yours, Sharon and Richard.
Thank you very much. I'm Sharon Hall, and Richard is with me today, and he will be helping go through this presentation. We're sort of a team. I guess you could call us that, right, Richard? So let's get started. We've come up with some rules that we feel help people manage dementia, because it really can only be managed, and we have to know how to manage it in our world and know that they are in a different world. So let's just get started. This is rule number one. The first step when you have a dementia diagnosis, and if you have it and you have done this, This is very much part of what you need to do. Your first step should be seeing a certified elder law attorney. And there is an organization, and we'll put that in the chat for you, where you can find one in your area. And that's very important to do. And the reason for that is you sometimes will need to use Medicaid if you have a nursing home entrance. So that's very expensive. A lot of people don't have the funds to be able to sustain that. So seeing an elder law attorney will enable them to be able to protect assets for the living spouse. So that's very important. You also need a financial power of attorney and a healthcare power of attorney. Now, on both of those, the well spouse does not have the person with dementia as their POA. So you make someone else other than the person with dementia your own. If you are a caregiver, make someone else your power of attorney. I personally have my son and daughter-in-law as my power of attorney, both in financial and healthcare, and I made it available immediately. I didn't make it upon my being into an institution or something like that. I made it immediate. This way, no matter what happens, where we are, whatever happens, they can be there and be the power of attorney immediately. And that really came in handy for me because I broke my femur at one point and during Rod having FTD, and my daughter-in-law grabbed the healthcare power of attorney, came to the hospital, and they gave her all the information she needed. So this is very important to have. An advance directive and or a POST or MOLST. Now, what is that? POST is a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment or a medical order for life-sustaining treatment. It's called different things in different states, but it's actually a signed physician's order about how you want your life to end. So you have choices, and it's not in stone. You can change it at any time, but it's signed by a physician. So what this does is if I say I don't want to be resuscitated, and that's part of this form that you fill out depending on your state, depends on what the questions are asked, and you fill it out, and that can go to a person that comes in the ambulance. You can hand that POST or MOLST to them, and they know not to resuscitate because they are there to resuscitate. And if you have a POST or a MOLST, they will not. If you have an advance directive, that's not technically a legal physician's document. So most people don't understand that. So if you have very strong feelings about your end of life and when you wanted to be resuscitated and when you do not, then a POST or a MOST is your way to do that. So that's very important. These legal things, making this plan is very important. If you haven't done it, we encourage you to do it.
And
Richard, take
Sharon,
rule number. Yeah, go ahead.
well, I want to also add that while it's vital legally, most definitely, because we're all going to end up in a hospital at some point needing to advocate for our person. And we want to make sure that every document we have allows us to do that. I think, doing this kind of planning also opens up the conversation to the family at large, because we're dealing with, unfortunately, a diagnosis that doesn't have an outcome that's positive. So for me, in getting, our state and all that documentation down, it also brought in my brother-in-law, my family side as well, my sisters, and everyone knew the plan. So as we are on this journey, it's one less conversation because we're already synced up.
Very
And for
important
me,
point, Richard.
it's
Yeah.
one less stressor that we
Mhm.
have to negotiate down the road.
Absolutely true. Yeah, families should always be involved and they should always know what your wishes are, no matter what. Richard?
So this one was a hard one for me, learning to hate the disease and not the person. As Betsy said, I come to this because my husband was diagnosed with FTD and the behavioral variant, and that meant executive function. was going, and action and consequence got divorced. Well, I did not know that that was going to be the precursor to what I was planning, because I was filing for divorce after spending my life not being able to get married, and now realizing I had a marriage that was failing, was quite a burden spiritually. And then upon diagnosis and knowing that it was an organic experience, I learned to change my focus. The love, the emotions are all there still. The limbic system, the part that holds all those primal feelings and thoughts, they still function. It's just functioning differently. So I've learned to hate frontotemporal dementia. I still love my husband dearly. I still look at him every afternoon and smile, and I'm grateful for the fact that, yeah, he's lucky he has me on this journey, and I'm happy to be here on this journey with him. Not the plan I had, but it's still the plan that's been laid in front of us. So there's a tree outside in the yard. It takes all my anger. I hate that tree. The tree is FTD for me. My person is not. With that, I don't care if it's FTD, if it's Alzheimer's, if it's vascular. The more you can flatter them, the better. Why throw grease on a loop when you're really looking for sand? And so for me, the more I can do to slow down an obsessive thought, the better. And it means I'm wrong. I'm wrong all the time. That's okay. I'm still here. So being wrong takes on a whole different perspective. I am wrong because, well, I'm wrong because I want to be happy and I want him to be happy. So, as the song goes, if loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right. So I don't need to be right. And so with that, you try to do everything you can to just slow down certain obsessions. Of course, if it's not a danger, if it's just, like we check the doors 100 times a day here, I don't stop it. It's okay. I don't need to be right about that. I don't need to argue about it. I just like, are we locked? Good. And again, that's where being in the moment. I'm in his moment. I'm living in his world. I don't need to worry about that. It's not a safety issue. And if that brings comfort to him, then it brings comfort to me. Sharon?
Yeah, remember that you always have to agree. Don't argue. You'll never win. Dementia will always win. You won't win. You can't reason with someone whose neurons in their brain are dying. You just can't reason. That reasoning is not there any longer.
Right.
So all it does is make you upset. So you need to just agree. What difference does it make? What is it to you? It's your sanity is what it is. And apologize. Learn to take the blame. I'm so sorry. That was all my fault. I didn't mean to do that. The argument stops there. Where does it go after someone has apologized? It just doesn't go anywhere else. So it's
it's
important.
right, because when you say I'm sorry, you can't argue against that.
That's right.
So you're not initiating further dialogue. And for me, it's like, I'm sorry, I love you, is the two phrases that go hand in glove in this house.
Yeah. And
they
whatever
just
works for you. Yeah.
right.
We're all
you find
different,
it.
right? Yeah. You
Right.
find what works for you.
Yes. And I found early on to track their language, mimic their language as you try to express and get in their world. Use their vocabulary, not yours.
And rule number 3 is my go-to. My job as a care partner for someone with dementia is to keep him safe, but to keep myself sane. And we live by that rule. If Rod wants to do something and I think it's not safe for him, he knows I'm going to say, I'm sorry, that's not safe. We started this in the very beginning. Keep him safe, keep me sane. Because when we started on Rod's journey, I also had my mother who had vascular dementia living with me. So I used to call them the twins. They knew it, but I called them that regularly, but I needed to have some rules. And my rules were to keep them safe and to keep myself sane. So that's the way that we handle it. Everything is handled by those two rules. We always look at our lens and say, is this safe for Rod? And is it going to keep me sane? And if either one of those is a no, we have to reevaluate what we're doing. So there have been several times when Rod said, I want to this or I want to that. I'll say, I'm thinking that that's not so safe for you. But we started this from the beginning. The minute that he was diagnosed, I said, we have to have some concrete rules around here, and it's going to be to keep you safe. That's my goal. I am keeping both of you safe. But in keeping you safe, I have to keep myself sane. So this is
Yeah,
where
I mean,
that
it's like,
rule came from.
right. I mean, in our house, as you know, and now everyone else will, I'm married to a professional equestrian, and the idea of getting on a horse at this point is just, well, you know, if I want to be single tomorrow morning, that would be the way to go, right? Um, it just is not a safe option. But in order to keep me sane in it, I take him to horse shows. We watch. He can narrate what he's observing and still tap into that knowledge that's locked all the way.
I had my big fruit bowl too. Good. Eat some banana.
I think we have somebody that's
Betsy,
not on
you're gonna,
mute there,
yeah,
Betsy.
Mama E.
Sorry.
So we need to find it's a juggle in keeping safe and sane. You don't want to keep them so safe and you so sane that we're living in a plastic bubble as well. So nothing is static. We all, and as Sharon just said just before, we have to figure out our way to the answer. And these quote unquote rules are general guidelines that you're going to have to fit your person into and what makes them happy. Because on, you know, any day, for me, the most important thing is finding happiness in the day.
That's how you do it.
That's right. This is my big thing. You learn to lean into yes. It was hard. I mean, as soon as diagnosis came in, what I realized is everything I was being told I needed to do was about stopping things, was about telling, no, you can't drive. No, you can't do your profession anymore. No, I'm sorry, we can't get on that 8-hour flight and go overseas to visit your mother because you could have a meltdown on the airplane and I don't know what I could do at 30,000 feet. So it's really important to try to get to know through the yes door. So a lot of it is improv, and we joke all the time about dementia improv. So it's yes, and let's do this instead. Again, the horse thing. No, you can't ride. I don't say no, you can't ride. I'm like, oh, there's a show. Why don't we go watch? So I've scratched the itch without answering it. Right now, we're obsessed with going home because it's summertime. And this is the week we would be overseas. And I'm like, oh, sounds like a plan. Let's look up flight information. And we do. And I punch in numbers and I punch in 2 round first class tickets from where we live, which is very expensive. And we have budgets in our house. So even in our state of unknowing, there's a recognition that $30,000 is a lot of money for a flight to Sweden. So I've said no, but I've said yes, because he has now been part of the process. And it's like, okay, we'll look again in a day or so. So it's really becoming creative. And the more you say no, the more pushback you get from people. Sharon?
Yeah, it's thinking outside the box. And I think in this bottom right corner, you put this on your refrigerator. The only thing that limits you from any of this is your ego. That's it. That's bottom line. It's you. You're the only person in this relationship that can change. So that's really important to remember. They can't change. You have to be the one to change.
Right.
You have to be the one to save yourself, so to speak.
No.
Learn their triggers. There are triggers. You will find that everyone is triggered by something. And these are the things that usually trigger them. People, if they're annoying people, people who don't understand, those are triggers. So you want to limit that trigger as much as you can. We all have people in our lives that just don't believe us, or they don't think that our person has dementia, or they don't want to be part of the whole thing. Try to weed them out of your life, and try to weed those people who don't understand out, because it's a trigger for them. That my husband, he doesn't know, our people don't look like they have dementia. Everybody has this like thought of what somebody with dementia looks like. Well, there's no looks like in dementia. People look very much like everyone else for a very long period of time. But if you speak to them, sometimes you're going to get responses that are not like someone that what they look like. So it's annoying to them when people question that they have dementia when they say they do, or those are things that you can intervene with. And things, confusing menus. Oh, you want to go back to people? You want to say something?
No,
Richard?
no. Go ahead, finish your thought. I'll jump in then.
Okay. Things are very important too for triggers. Confusing menus and too many choices. I can't take Rod to like a McDonald's and he looks at that big, huge menu and his brain goes, ah. So what we do whenever we go out anywhere, I mean, we're in the age of technology here. I go in and I look at the menu of where we are going to eat, and they make at the time when I had two of them, they each made their choices, including your beverage, what do you want on your salad, do you want a dessert, everything that the server might ask. I know before we get there. And when we get there, they don't have to worry about those confusing menus and too many choices. Oftentimes you'll hear your person say, I'll have what you're having. That means that they can't figure out the menu.
Right.
So help them by before you go, say, I pulled up this menu here. They have this and they have that. I'm going to have this, but this sounds good for you because you really like that. How about that? And then you say to the server when they first come over, I'll be the person ordering and I'll be the person answering any of your questions. And it's always worked for us. So you had something to add, Richard?
Well, I was just part of what you're saying, which brings me up, that we have to be aware of is their aperture in life is narrowing. So as the disease progresses, they can only take in so much. So large spaces with lots of people in it, a menu with too many choices, a menu period to make a choice. It's too much to process in. So the factory default mechanism is no, silence, you do it, all these other things that then we're like, wait a second, we've been together all these years and we're both adults, you make your own freaking decision. But they can't anymore because they can't compute all that information. And so we also have to then recognize, is it time to stop going to a restaurant? Do you, in our house, it's like, if you want to see my husband, then you come over and see the king. His hours for reception are between this and this. Otherwise, I'm not going out because he gets very confused and he gets very quiet. So you have to understand that, or I should say, recognize that as the aperture closes, all these other triggers then kind of set off. And they're defense mechanisms. They're trying to survive in a world that they no longer understand themselves.
Yeah, and places are a big deal. Loud noises, crowded places, if they have to wait a long time, that's a big no.
Right.
So you might say, oh, my dad loves baseball. We're going to go to the baseball game together. He may not be able to handle the baseball game. He's got people sitting right next to him. There's noise. There's the loudspeaker. There's all this carrying on. People are talking. That can be way too much. And even though you think you're doing a favor because it's something he always loved, it may be very difficult for him and he may get very annoyed because that becomes a trigger because of the noise.
Right. And in that instance, which is perfect, you bring out baseball cards, right? You satisfy the need without igniting the trigger.
Let's talk about isolation.
It's the most isolating, talk about isolation. This is the most isolating journey you'll ever be on, right? You sit in a room with someone you love and you're alone. You go out into the world, and because the disease is invisible, you're alone. It's very isolating. And we have to, as caregivers, be really conscious that we make an effort to be present. I hate the word mindfulness because it's so overused and overmarketed, but you do need to be mindful. So you need to make sure you get out into nature, that you listen to some of your favorite music. If you can still do mutually enjoyable activities together, great. If not, maybe if there's an adult day center will give you some free time. I'm of the belief that just because he goes away to a day center or not, am I really filling my time and making myself not feel isolated? At this point, I could do it with him standing next to me, because I have learned and he doesn't process anymore what's coming at him. So I can start filling myself. And I need to steal those moments. And sometimes it's 5 minutes a day. Sometimes it's a couple hours. I have started my cortisol reduction program, which I probably should have done 2-3 years ago. But I've changed my diet. I make sure I meditate every day, and meditation is not necessarily coming from a Buddhist or any other perspective, that I just sit and quietly be with myself for 15 minutes a day minimum. And
It's
it
really
just
important.
helps. Right. It really helps reset. I think a good day is when I step out of bed, I am neutral. And that for me now is good. I, for too many years, walked out of bed and the first step on the ground was already full of anxiety. So in order to just kind of mitigate those really despairing experiences, try to tie a finger or toe to the thread of hope and find it attached to your flower garden, music, something, and that you can just always tug on it to kind of just shake you out of that moment. It is the best way I can describe it.
And most of the time you're taking care of someone that you love. So you have some mutual interests, whether it's a parent or your spouse or a sibling or even a child. In our young adult world, our young onset world, some parents are taking care of their children with dementia, but you have mutual interests. There's always something that's a mutual interest. So if it's bird watching or visiting gardens, or you don't want to be in a situation where it's a trigger,
Right.
but finding that mutual interest, even if it's just at home and doing a puzzle together, at least you're not isolating. You're getting yourself out there. So you just need to remember that you have a life and you don't need to isolate. And if you use adult day centers, that's fine. That's the time that I do my doctor's appointments. I do webinars like this sometimes. Whatever I do when Rod is at a day center, you find a good fit and a support group. You can't do dementia without support. I don't care who you are.
Right.
And if you think you can, you're going down with the ship. And the statistics on that are quite bad. There are statistics as high as 40% of care partners of dementia die before the person with dementia. And we're telling you all of these tricks of the trade and rules of the road, so you're not a statistic. So find your support group, whether it be in person, whatever your disease is in dementia, there are support groups for you. Richard and I have a support group that we do on Mondays and Saturdays on Zoom for people with caring for someone with FTD. There are Lewy body support groups. There are support groups for every dementia need. Find support, build your own network. It's important for you to have that support. You can't do this alone. It will take you
And
down.
And I want to address Julie's question about if you go to a shop and would you tell someone they have young onset? Julie, for me, the answer is yes, because that works to prevent me from feeling isolated. And it goes into letting community be part of what's going on. You know, when we see someone else with a disease in progress, if you see a cancer person and they're wearing, you know, a hat or a scarf, you automatically recognize it, and there's hopefully empathy and compassion that's immediately afforded to you. So I don't shy away from it. I invite my village, figuratively and literally, to know what's going on, so I don't feel so alone in this process.
And I really, we've been in this, we're on year 8 already. And Rod has behavior variant. He has outbursts. He's had them in public. And because it's FTD, so now it's more well known with the Bruce Willis diagnosis, but for the most part, people didn't know what FTD was. So I will say, I'm sorry, he has dementia, and I will take care of the situation. Dementia gives them some starting point to know that there's something going on cognitively. There's nothing embarrassing about having a brain disease. If it was someone with a brain tumor acting out, you should have empathy, just as you should. Sometimes we create the stigma by hiding out, by not talking about it, by not saying my person has a dementia. And if you have the chance to say what it is and explain the differences in them, yay. If not, at least you're letting people know that it's okay to be out with dementia. This is not a character flaw. This is a brain disease. We have to get out of this thought process that this is some sort of character flaw, that they're saying things that they never said before. They're swearing in public. They're making advances to people. That it's the brain dying. We have to understand it's the brain dying. So I always just say, I'm sorry, he has dementia, and it's on them. If they don't have compassion, that's not my problem. I have told them what the issue is. I'm not going to stay inside and hide away. I'm going to be out there doing what we do. Asking for help should be your superpower. If you're asking, you're ready. If you're asking yourself, how can I get more help? How do I support myself? Then you're ready. I have a tremendous community. Well, I used to live in I still live in a tremendous community. We recently moved from a home to an apartment, a 55 plus apartment, which is a great thing for us because we have lots of friends here now, and we've only been here a month, and everybody is so pleasant and they're all helpful. Many of them have had people with dementia and are willing to come in and sit with Rod if I have to go do an errand or something. So it's a very good fit for us, but it was in our old community as well. I asked for help from the day that Rod was diagnosed. He was diagnosed. I wrote a letter to my neighbors. I put it in their mailbox and said, this is what Rod has. These are the symptoms. These are things that can happen. If this happens, please let me know. And if you make a big meal and you've got a lot of leftovers and you don't want to eat it again, bring them on down, because sometimes I just don't feel like cooking. And my community has just responded. No matter where I am, when I ask for the help, they give it. And if somebody says to you, oh, please let me know if there's anything I can do, have a list ready. Have a list ready and say, it would be really great if you could do one of these, and have the list, like sit for 2 hours so I can go to a doctor's appointment, come and watch a movie, take him to breakfast, whatever your needs are, put it in writing, and say, when somebody says, is there anything I can do? Have the list ready. Be ready when you need the help and somebody says, can I help you? Be ready. Always be ready.
And I'm just going to add also, be ready for the fact that the circle you might engage is not necessarily the circle that's going to show up. So always ask for help, but help might come from the person you did not expect help from coming from.
That's right.
Asking for help and being open to it. I've
Yeah.
been let down by people I thought were going to be there.
And you learn pretty quickly who will and
Right.
who won't.
Right.
And it's
So-
okay if they won't. That's
Oh, yeah.
okay too. It's their
Yeah.
choice, and you don't despair if family members say, "Oh no, I just can't do that." Don't despair. Find your own family. In our chat, we've been called a fremily, friends who become family. And that's why support is so important. People that are going through the same thing as you are. That's really important to have that. And sometimes that's the person that's going to help you. I get help from afar sometimes. So always keep in mind that you need help. This is not a singular thing to do. Don't sweat the small stuff, right, Richard?
You can't, because we've already gotten a diagnosis, and that's big. Everything else is small. Everything else, every day, everything that happens, I have gratitude for now. The only things I sweat are really big. Are we starting to fall? Do I need to get a walk assist? That's the stuff you start thinking about. Everything else, I mean, I will happily announce we got a shower last night, which in our house is clearly it's a holiday, because they do not happen that frequently here anymore. But I don't sweat the in between. I set up. If it happens, great. If it doesn't, not great for me, great for him. He's happy. But I also learned yesterday that he has forgotten how to towel dry. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is part of the puzzle. So I need to be ready to help with the toweling off if I want more of that activity. But no one ever died from not showering. So
that's
really,
Jerry Hall.
right, really pick your battles, I say, because we've already lost the war. So pick your battles. For me, I want to be as happy as I can on any given day. I want to be present with the person I love as much as possible. And if I'm obsessing about every little thing that's going wrong, or the news goes crazy and he is obsessed with watching the news but can't tell you a thing that's going on, I'm like, it's okay. I'll have a friend who I'll talk to that about it. No longer our conversation. So look at the big picture and focus on the big picture is what I say.
Oh, yeah. And like I said before, only you can change. So understand that you've got to let that ego go. Only you can change. And if that means biting the bullet and letting small things go, what does it matter? It doesn't matter if your person wants to put the dishes away. Yay, thank you so much. That's such a help. Now, if they all were put away dirty, what's the big deal? You're not going to die from that. When you take it out to use it again, you'll wash it and use it. Don't sweat the small stuff. This is not the person you knew. The person you knew isn't there anymore. This is a new person you're dealing with. So you have to get used to those new things, and you have to let go of that ego, and you have to let go of having to always be right. If you want
And you
to
have to
always
find
be
humor in it.
right, yeah, exactly. And we laugh a
Look,
lot around
oh
here.
my God. As you're talking, what I'm really thinking of is, I vacuum or do housework, and I'm like, you want to help? And what I get is he lifts his feet off the ground so I can get the vacuum underneath it.
Hey,
And I'm
that's
like,
help.
thank you. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
like, there you go. Thank you very much. Appreciate the assist.
Exactly.
You just have to laugh. So, yeah.
Yeah. And
You
sometimes
just
we
have
make
to
our
laugh.
own trouble. So, and it's frustrating. I know it's frustrating. There are days when I don't want to have to do that. And we all get tired. We get a cold. We have the flu. We aches and pains, and we don't want to be bothered with this. But it's your survival. So we're telling you these sort of rules of the road so you can come out the other end and have a life. We all know where this is ending, and we have to accept the fact that this is a terminal disease. We have not found a cure. So we need to be able to manage the day to day. And that's what these rules are sort of about. Managing the day to day and keeping ourselves in a place where we're good. And if that means we take a respite vacation every 6 months of going away for a week, then that's what we do. You make the arrangements and you do it. You have to decide. We're all different. We all live in a different type of relationship. However, we all need to have a way to survive. And that's what we have sort of put this together, finding out that these are some of the things that really help us. And you'd be amazed. We have people come to the chat that say, oh, well, I could do it. Well, you say, just try it. Just try it. Just try it. Expect nothing. Praise everything. Try it. See what happens. They'll come back a couple weeks later and say, oh my gosh, it's like a different world, right, Richard? Doesn't that happen?
Yeah.
It happens.
Again, it's
Yeah. So you just have to try. Try it. Try it. You'll like it. So we want to leave a lot of room for questions here.
yes.
But we're going to give you our email addresses. We'll leave this up for a short time here. I do have a podcast, talkingftdforyou.podbean.com. Yes, it's focused to FTD, but believe me, dementia is dementia when you have some of these issues. So the issues that are talked about there are issues that a lot of people that are living with someone with dementia have. So you can always look there and see if there's something that would be of benefit to you. So we're going to turn it over to you, Betsy, and you can see if we have any questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, there was a couple, one that was sent in ahead of time, and there's a couple in the chat. So I'm going to go through those first, and then we'll open it up. But me being me and feeling the need to, I always want to say one more thing. I also just kind of wanted to add to some of the conversations you had about, turning a no into a yes. And what we found very helpful is the concept of reassure, validate, and redirect. That repeating the concern back is sometimes so incredibly valuable. That I know that you don't want to move, like if you're moving them to a different place, and asking them questions. What are you worried about? Or don't you want to have more people around you? Like you can ask questions to kind of like steer the conversation, and reassuring them. Sometimes that's all they're looking for, is they like the world is getting harder and harder for them, and you are so much of a rock for them. And so creating that, like repeating and reassuring your loved one, can go a really long way. So I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in on that. And then
That worth 5 cents.
And the first question that came in is, my dad is caring for my mom at home, and she's in the late stages of Alzheimer's. When is it time to get an in-home help and or hospice care? She's barely able to walk, is having trouble sitting up straight, and there's some swallowing issues. And she's concerned that it's too much for her dad.
It's called hospice. It's good. Before hospice is palliative. Everyone that's diagnosed with any dementia is eligible for palliative care, which is not hospice. Palliative care is not hospice. Hospice is palliative, but palliative is not hospice. So palliative care is available to everyone. And what it sort of is a care manager. You have a team of palliative people that come in and help you with finding resources. They're not as hands-on as hospice. Hospice is hands-on. The nurse will visit you every week. An aide will come and do baths and preparations, dressing, that type of thing, 2 or 3 days a week, sometimes 5 days a week near the end when they have to have baths in the bed. So hospice is excellent and should be used as soon as you can get it. People think that you have to be 2 days away from passing away. That's not the way it works. But if you have palliative care first, palliative, especially with the other dementias, will see the progression, because all of the hospice requirements are based on Alzheimer's. So palliative care is easily transformed into hospice when needed and soon enough to be of benefit, right?
And
So
if I can
always
just add
recommend
to
that.
that.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, was that palliative care is 80% of Medicare, sorry, I think it's 80% of it is paid by Medicare, and the rest can get paid for your insurance. So it is, while it might not be 100% free, it is very cost effective. And we'll put it in the chat. There's a directory that you can go and you can put in the zip code and see where palliative is. Because what's great about them also is they can help you with that decision of when is hospice ready to step in.
Well, let's divide the line here, if you will. Palliative, which we've been on from day one, is the plan of life. How do we want to live life until we get to a critical stage where we transition over to hospice? Hospice then is, for me, more defined of where failure to thrive starts coming into the equation. So while we're on a palliative program, we can do whatever we want. There's no tests that we can't pursue, but we do have that care team around us. And when questions arise, I have some place to go to direct my knowledge and choices. And based upon a group of people that know us intellectually, philosophically, spiritually, I mean, the whole package is there. And as Sharon says, my doctor will also then more easily assess when it's time to transition over to a hospice, because we're not being assessed, in our case for FTD, where you have an Alzheimer's kind of construct, or, if you're vascular, how are you being assessed, and Lewy bodies and so on. So it allows us also to control the uncontrollable as much as possible. Right. So palliative is not at all that, we got weeks to go. And in our case with also dementia, when we switch over to hospice, it's not as eminent as we were initially, I think, programmed to believe.
So before I jump into the next question, I think the summary is, there's action that can be taken now to take some of the burden off of the person's dad, and palliative might be a good place to start. So the next question, we're in a bit of a different situation. Our mother lives in another city and alone. We have been encouraging her to choose an assisted living facility, but she has been very resistant. Most days she's okay. Her major episodes are about once a month, but she has her own health issues. They were present long before her recent diagnosis. She has no other interest in watching TV. So we're having difficult facilitating anything with her. And do you have any thoughts on maybe ways that they could approach her?
Well, I think you have to recognize she's in her factory reset. So the answer is no. So apathy. That's why she's just sitting. She can't figure out how to get through the process. She can't sequence. So it's easier to just sit and watch. So we're in factory reset mode. I think one of the hardest things, I don't know how I could do this if I was doing it from afar. And that's why I put in the chat, seeking a care navigator in the area, someone who you can work with from afar to maybe find facility, check in on her mother if there's resistance. It's a really tough slog trying to do it and not see the day in and day out behaviors and mood, and she's just always getting the snapshot, and you're always being the meanie. You got to move. We got to get you in. It's not being processed.
Yeah,
So that's, for me, where I'd be going.
Yeah.
Sharon, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's I've had people that do it. We've had people that do it from afar. It's not as easy to do from afar. And like Richard said, if you have a care manager that is checking in, or you have help that's going in on a regular basis, and you need another set of eyes, no matter what those should be. Some people have used their friends, the person's friends, to be the person that are the eyes and ears there, because there will come a time when a person with dementia cannot be left alone. And in that instance, you can blame the doctor. You can go to the doctor and say, she can't live alone. And that doctor can be the person that tells the person that you can't live alone. And it's different coming from a physician than coming from you saying, you have to move here. We can't do this from afar. The doctor is saying you cannot live alone. So let's talk about what that means. And do we have a place where you are now, or do you come closer to us? So those are ways that you can go around that living apart from someone, because it's difficult. You have to have eyes and ears. So however those eyes and ears are for you, that's what you need to look at. Either hiring a care manager that comes on a regular basis and knows what's going on and has eyes and ears, or their friends who are reporting to you, or you have a person that you're paying for care to go in and help her with meals or whatever, driving, whatever it is that they need. It depends on your situation, but when it comes down to you cannot be left alone at all, then that has to be a conversation that you can always put off on a doctor. You've done all,
And
are you saying
and
that
she's
you've done all
right.
that and
She's
she doesn't
right,
agree?
because in part, who knows if she even recognizes that she has a disease, for one.
Exactly.
So it's not a matter, we're not looking to get her to agree. We're looking to get her to be safe and be cared for. So looking to get her to agree means you think you're still dealing with a mind that can process action and consequence. So our
So,
job is not to get them to agree. Our job is to, again, to lean into that yes. So you're
so
going to have to,
I've
go
unmuted
ahead.
my, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm driving my daughter to therapy, so I've got a lot going on. The thing is, yes, we've done, doctors have told her, we've asked her, Mom, do you understand your diagnosis? And she says, well, I don't understand how all of a sudden I have dementia. And I said, well, first of all, it's not all of a sudden. This has been going on for some time. And as I stated previously in the chat, she's had 24-hour care for the last few months because we insisted that be in place for her since we don't live there. And that costs about $25,000 a month, which means that is not sustainable. And she's like, I don't need 24-hour care. Well, about a month ago, it was the end of May. I'm sorry, my daughter's in the car. She had an episode one Saturday night where she full on didn't know where she was, didn't know what she was doing. The caretaker said she took her pill box and was trying to leave the house. She was beating on the window, trying to get out of the house. And so this is when we try to explain to her, when she's in a regular state, Mom, and I played the voicemail from the caretaker for her to hear it. I said, we're not making all of this up. These things are happening and we can't be there to take care of you. My sister and I both work. We both live in different towns, and I've got my daughter, and this has been a long process. And we were taking care of my dad before that because he was ill and came home on hospice. And so this has been going on for back and forth to Raleigh with them trying to help for going on well over a year and a half now. And he passed last June. So, at every turn we have asked doctors for help. And they're like, well, she's diagnosed with dementia. We can't force her to go anywhere. And you're right. You can't force her to go anywhere. So we are truly stuck because she's like, I don't need to be in one of those places. Well, and we've told her there's going to come a time because she refuses to sign a power of attorney for us. We've asked for all of that for the last year. And she's like, well, I don't need a power of attorney. Why do y'all need that? Y'all just want to control me. Okay, let me show you how much I don't want to control you. That's why I've had to remove myself.
So Jen, from everything you're describing, and just you're trying to negotiate with someone who can't negotiate. So I think you and your family, your sisters, you need to step back, regroup in your approach. You need to make it, it's not you want her power of attorney, you want to share as much as you can together. So let her sign a document with you. So you're gonna have to kind of reapproach it, because you're not backing out of her loop.
Yeah,
I-
she's never gonna, yeah.
My
that-
sister, yeah, she's not going to, she wants to do it her way, and she's a very stubborn woman. She was stubborn before this
Right,
ever
right,
came.
but that's
Just-
it. But again, listen, you
I-
need it, but it's up, as Sharon says, we are the ones who are responsible for resetting. She's never going to reset, right? So we have to do it. So we have to recognize where she is where she is. So how do you and your family reset in order to get her safe? So everyone, who they were is who they were, and we love them, and we have, as I say, my husband's quirks were adorable until he became a schmuck, and those quirks were annoying. So, but I also recognize it's my job to make sure that I reset at this point. And that's all. So you guys gonna have to just take, I think, a breath is my best suggestion at this point, to figure out how to get the safety net around her.
Well,
And
that was the point of the
and-
24-hour care, but as I said,
Yeah.
that's sustainable.
Right,
So
right.
Right.
And so, but I would actually talk to a care manager in her area, and that can be a go-between, so that you're not the people that are always telling her these things. This is somebody else that's there to help her, that will say, that it's time for you to have somebody all the time, and the cost of that is expensive. So these are some options for you. Here are the options that are affordable to you. And a lot of times when it comes from another professional, whether it be a doctor or a care manager or nurse manager or whoever else, that person can intervene and have that meeting with all of you together, because there's Zoom, and you can be involved in that face to face with her, with a person that's there with her, just going over what this means. And there are times when you just have to pull the trigger. There are times when it doesn't matter how much they don't want to do something. If it has to be done for their safety, it has to be done. And those are the times that it doesn't matter. You just do it. And that sometimes comes down to that. But in order to sort of smooth it over, have an intermediary, whether it be a friend of hers or a relative of hers, if she has any sisters or brothers that can talk to her, anybody that can be that in between person. It's very hard for a parent to accept from a child telling them what to do. That's hard for a parent. You yourself should know that. Do you do everything your kids want you to do? I doubt it. So,
no, but she
yeah.
doesn't really have that mentality. But
Okay.
anyway,
But she can't. She can't. If your 2-year-old came up to you and wanted to skydive, you're going to say no. So, there are times when you have to be the parent without her knowing you're the parent, I guess is the best way to put that. And sometimes there's a bottom line, and this is the bottom line. We can't keep you safe unless we XYZ. So we're going to XYZ.
I feel like I'm just regurgitating. We have done all of that. My sister's a counselor, so she's talked to her in counselor speak. She is just resistant to everything. So
We're gonna.
yeah, I know.
I'm sorry, Jen. I'm not trying to cut you off. I'm looking at the time, and we just have
It's
one or two more questions. But with that said, Sharon's information's here. I'm going to put mine in the chat, and we'd be happy to keep talking about this offline a little bit more, and provide you a little bit more direct information on a potential care manager. While we are not medical experts, we definitely, one of the goals of For Their Thoughts is to help direct you to the professionals that can help the situation. So
Okay, thank you.
yep. And then, so we're at the top of the hour. I'm going to throw one more question out at you guys, and then this will be the last one. But I'm also going to put an email, sorry, not an email, a link in the chat, so that if you had some questions we didn't get to, and I saw some of them, and I want to copy them down, that you could submit the questions and we'll get back to you. So the last question that I saw was that sticky point in the middle when you are not eligible for Medicaid, what other financial options Are you guys aware? And I know that's kind of a long question, so if you're not sure right off the top of your head, we can table that one. I did put a link to PACE also in the chat.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
oh,
that's a
sorry, go ahead.
difficult place. Go ahead, Richard.
Right. Well, I know we're in North Carolina, and so through our area on aging, there are grants that they offer for respite care and adult day care. So that's one aspect. I mean, day in, day out, not great. I mean, we don't live in a, our nation isn't set up to really be supporting the caregivers' financial needs so much. So you're going to have to look that way. You have your relief program. There are other respite programs, grant monies out there. Some of them encumbered, some of them not. But I don't know of too many national programs that really help us. Sharon?
Yeah, there aren't, and unfortunately, that's just the bottom
No, I
line.
know.
And that's why people really need to talk to the people that are in legislation, both in your state and at the national level, about what the needs are of caregivers, because there are a lot of needs and they're unmet. And a lot of times, we have a lot of states that have not expanded Medicaid, so it leaves a lot of people off the table. And yet, who can afford $120,000 a year for care? It's just not sustainable. So basically, that's what advocacy is about. It's writing to those people, knowing your legislators, telling them over and over what is needed and why you're drowning here. And so it's very important. And basically, that's the bottom line, is that unless we keep asking for things, we will not get things. So it's very important to support advocacy and to talk to your legislators, both in your state and at a federal level.
So with that said, I'm going to have to wrap this up because we're a couple of minutes over. Thank you, Sharon and Richard, for presenting today. I greatly appreciate it. I know there were a few questions we couldn't get to, but I have copied them down, and I've put my email address in the chat, and it's here as well. So feel free to reach out and we can have some one-on-one conversation. Like I said at the beginning, one of our goals at Further Thoughts is to help take that burden off of you. We can't always answer the question, but we will do our best to try to help navigate you to the right place. So, and this is recorded, and so we will send you a recording of this as well. So, and some of the links that were added during the conversation. So thank you everybody for joining. Sharon and Richard, do you have any closing remarks?
Thank you for coming, and we hope we could help you in some small way.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, for me, it's just remember that we're not alone. No matter how much we feel it, there is community out there for us.